Welcome to Sideline Sanity with me, Michele Tafoya, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Go to legacypminvestments.com, legacypminvestments.com. Coming up, Tim Young, at Tim Runs His Mouth on Twitter. Do you know who he is? You'll want to. Stay tuned.
For nearly 3 decades, she's reported the action from the sidelines. She started very young. She's covered the NBA, NFL, Olympics, and the college football and basketball national championships. And now, during these insane times in our world, Michele Tafoya thinks we need a serious dose of sanity. This is Sideline Sanity with your host, one of the sanest people on planet Earth, Michele Tafoya.
All right, welcome to Sideline Sanity. You know, there was a stretch of time, many of you know, I just jumped off of social media. I had it with all of it, and I jumped off. But lately, I've jumped back on. And I'm finding a lot of people I like to follow. And one of those people who just happens to make me chuckle every time I see one of his tweets is Tim Young. And he joins us now at Tim Runs His Mouth, because he kind of does on Twitter, which is refreshing. Tim, how you doing?
Crazy concept, right? I always like it too when like trolls say like, "Oh, you're really running your mouth. Your handle's the right thing." I'm like, "Yeah, that's the idea. I don't take myself seriously." So it's
It's amazing how many people do take their tweets very, very seriously, whether they're blue checked or not. You know, it's when you get a response to a tweet that you think, "Good Lord, what is this?" What do you do? Do you tend to ignore or do you go after them?
I've reached a point where I ignore them. There are times where, like, if it's a blue check and they're really stupid, I'll say something. But for the most part, like, you get to a point, like, and you've got to be at that point too, and probably earlier than me because of your experience in TV and whatnot. Like, you just start ignoring the trolls. You almost sort of feel like a sociopath because people are saying the worst things to you, and you're like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, but it is amazing, though. People are saying the worst things to you. You know, I'm not just talking about to you. It's the general you. It's amazing what people are capable of saying on Twitter. We call it the keyboard warrior or whatever, how everyone's got courage behind the keys. But some of these people are legitimately, you know, out there people. I can think of a few celebs who say some stuff that I shake my head. What do you make of are people is it stupidity? Is it anger? Is it ignorance? Is it all of the above? What is driving so much of this hatred?
I think it's ignorance. So my rule is don't say something on Twitter or online that you wouldn't say to someone's face. And I don't think a lot of people kind of follow through with that because there's a different generation now, right? Like we came from generations where, if you said something inappropriate to somebody, you'd get punched. Yeah. And that's still how I play the game. A lot of folks now are in the participation trophy era where if they get punched after saying something completely awful to someone, then suddenly they would claim to be the victim. And so that dynamic has shifted where, like, as much as it seems like I'm a troll or somebody from our generation is like a troll, they're still respectful as opposed to saying, the most horrible things to someone. And it really does just come down to, did you get beat up as a kid?
Yeah. It just seems like it's very, very easy for people, if they disagree with you, to just call you a name. A bigot, a homophobe, a xenophobe, a racist, a sexist, a transphobic.
Fascist, Hitler.
Yeah, all of those things. All right. So if you wouldn't tweet something that you only tweet things that you would say to someone's face. If you had the pleasure and the privilege of being in on a Speaker Pelosi press conference, and you had an opportunity to ask her a question, what do you think your first question to her would be?
Oh, it would have to be something complex. I would go prepped, and it would be something complex about her insider trading with her husband.
Yeah.
Because I loved how she ran. Actually, it's my most popular tweet ever the other day. How she ran off the podium when she was asked about that insider trading. Have you ever given your husband information and she like quickly ran? She acted like she didn't hear it, and then she ran away like the Dave Chappelle sketch. And I think you show up with data and compare her investments to someone else. I mean, it would be a very complex. I'm not a total goof. It would be a very complex, data-driven question where she would have to answer it because their investments in tech and their success in investing in tech is, I think, like less than 1% of people have the success that they have. So it's very clear that you can draw the line that there is insider trading there. So I think that would be where I'd start.
She strikes me as someone who is either in such denial, or she's almost got this weird brain that allows her to
Drunk.
look at all the things she's done and be okay with it, and act as though she's not. I mean, to me, she's let them eat cake on steroids. You know, when she did the whole ice cream thing on late night TV when we were all locked down in the pandemic, I get by with these really expensive ice creams. And now with the insider trading and all of this, I'm baffled by her, and I just sort of wonder if there's if you become so powerful and wealthy that you lose all track of reality. What do you make of that?
So there's two elements. Number one, I always have to mention this, and I think it's the most amazing thing. When Trump first shut down the border to China when COVID started, do you know where she went? The first place she went in San Francisco? Do you remember
She
the
went to
story?
Chinatown.
Yeah, but do you know specifically where she went?
No.
Fortune Cookie Factory. That's an American thing, and it's such a stereotype. That's like if something happened on the border, I'd go to Taco Bell. So like that's like it's so unbelievable that she did that, and like the media just like glanced over it. Went to a Fortune Cookie Factory. No, she comes from a long line of Baltimore mayors, and that's where she grew up. So I grew up in Baltimore, and I worked for Governor Ehrlich back in the day, who's kind of a rhino now, but so I worked in Republican politics in Maryland, and I got to see the corruption in Baltimore City in particular. I was trained as a public defender. I went to law school in Baltimore, and when you realize where she came from, the D'Alessandro family, and how kind of corrupt they were, and like, I mean, the power is totally unchecked in Baltimore, and it's a total. Whoever is the mayor there can do literally whatever they want. Nobody does anything about them. Nobody in the state will do anything about them. When you realize her history, this is just how she was brought up. I mean, she is a legacy Democrat politician, but she's a legacy Democrat politician from one of the dirtiest cities in America, as far as crime, as far as political crime. I mean, it's Baltimore is the bottom of the barrel. I'd imagine there are other. I mean, I'd imagine Chicago is pretty bad too, but Baltimore in particular goes unchecked because it's not quite as big as Chicago, and kind of gets like miffed. The statistics, the crime statistics, kind of like get pushed around a bit. But her history is all that. I mean, I believe it was her father was the one who put up all the Confederate statues in Baltimore during when things were getting desegregated to send a certain group of people a message. That's why a lot of the Confederate statues went up, by the way, in America.
You know, that needs to be pointed out. I mean, the hypocrisy of some of these people is mind blowing. But I didn't know you were so entrenched in the scene in Baltimore. And I think Baltimore gets overshadowed because of its proximity to DC. So people are so focused on DC that they kind of go, oh, there's the little brother of Baltimore, and we'll worry about them later. But that is, I mean, the corruption in the education system, it is so sad to me. What's the kind of, can you tell us what the worst thing is that you saw there in terms of the corruption?
Yeah. So under the O'Malley administration, when he was, remember, Martin O'Malley was the mayor of Baltimore for a bit. It was, it's either $45 million or $54 million disappeared from the school system, just disappeared. The money just went away. Like, that was just magic. Like, they never found it. It just went away. And it's unbelievable. Then a little bit later on, they found out that the head of the Department of Education in Baltimore, her driver at the time was making $200,000 a year. I mean,
she had a driver. I mean, that's just to start with. She had a driver.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, it's unchecked money. It's unchecked power. They can do whatever they want in that city. It's remarkable. And again, I flipped the number. I think it's 54 million. I think it's the higher number. Magically disappeared. They never found it. There was never any accountability for it.
That makes me sick, Tim. Like, how do we not hold their feet to the fire? How are people left so unaccountable in these situations?
I don't know.
It's one
of those things. It's one of those things, right? So, like, I mean, how do you check a government that is completely? I mean, they have a supermajority Democrat everywhere in Maryland. I mean, sure, the governor is a Republican right now, but basically his policies are Democrat too. But all the legislation is all the legislators. It's a super majority. There's just no checks and balances. And by the way, and like I'm not just saying this about Democrats. If there's a super majority of Republicans somewhere, they do the same stuff. It's just a different. It's a different side of corruption. There's just when you don't have a check and balance system, things just go off the rails.
Oh, and things have been off the rails in Baltimore. It makes me really sad. I have some friends who live there and seemingly live content lives there, but I want to say to them, what do you make of these education statistics that no one's getting proper education in your public schools? I mean, that part drives me nuts. So
Well, you listen.
I
You know in sports when they cover the Preakness, right? Like
yeah.
if you go 5 feet outside of where the Preakness is run, up there on North Avenue, that side there, it's awful. I mean, it is. It
Yeah.
is like it's almost like years ago, people were outraged because someone said that Baltimore reminded them of apartheid in South Africa, right? Where you have like very
Mhm.
wealthy and then like one block over is very, very poor. That's exactly what Baltimore is.
And people got angry about the
Yeah,
truth.
they were
Okay.
offended by that. They were like, how dare you
Yeah.
compare a place in America?" And I'm like, "No, no, no." See, and that's the thing. Like, so I lean conservative, but there's a lot of stuff that I saw in the real world that to me, I'm like, come on, we can't deny some of this stuff. There's
Yeah.
a lot there. The other thing that bothered me and what I was like trained with in Baltimore is, when I see like a police involved shooting, not to get like super serious here, but like when like an unarmed black guy gets shot, I automatically think, what did the police do? Because Baltimore was so corrupt and the police there are so corrupt and so bad and get away with whatever that I just assume that the police did something wrong. Whereas like a lot of conservatives, number one, we shouldn't be jumping to either side in any kind of situation where we have no information. But for me, because I was trained by the former head of the public defender's office, he was my advisor in law school, and I kind of started getting into that for a bit before I decided not to be a lawyer. Um, I automatically am like, I don't want, not all cops are bad, but when certain cops are really bad actors. And in Baltimore, it's
Yeah.
a lot more than normal. And so I'm trained for that.
Wow.
Mhm.
All right. Quick break. When we come back, let's find out why Tim Young decided not to be a lawyer with all those brains in his head and shoes on his feet and all the rest of the Dr. Seuss
I'm
stuff.
not wearing
All right.
shoes.
Oh, that maybe that was the problem. All right. Back with Tim Young in 1 second. Well, since November of last year, the stock market has plummeted, but gold has been on the rise. Gas prices are a joke. Inflation is at a 40-year high. The stock market is all over the place. And then there's this war in Russia, with Russia and Ukraine, rather, that has everyone kind of like wondering what's going to happen next. But the good news is you have options. All this instability is there, but you have options. Gold prices are rising as investors turn to gold for protection. Gold provides a hedge against inflation and protects against a weakening dollar. Legacy Precious Metals is the only company I trust when it comes to investing in gold and silver. You need an investment that's going to protect your wealth and your retirement. So call Legacy Precious Metals today. You want to be proactive while there's still time. Hate to remind you about 2008, but you remember those who invested in gold saw huge gains and others lost their retirements. Legacy Precious Metals can advise you on all of your options for investing in gold and silver. You can speak to an IRA expert at Legacy Precious Metals. And why wouldn't you? Just call them and ask some questions. 866 528 1903. 866 528 1903. Or download their free investor's guide at legacypminvestments.com. Legacypminvestments.com. All right, Tim, you said you're trained as a lawyer. You studied to be a lawyer, decided not to become a lawyer. After pouring your heart, soul, money, effort into learning the law, why did you decide not to become a lawyer?
Oh, I turn into a total POS if I'm an attorney. I viewed it too much as a game and not, and I woke up one morning and realized that there's real humans involved in it. And so I was being trained as a defense attorney, as a public defender. And I always thought that, and what really kind of dug into me was if I knew that I would win. I was very good, especially in law school. The next crime is on me, right? So like if there's a rapist, a guy who should go to jail for rape, and I get him off because of some sort of technicality, which is very easy to do when you're dealing with dumb cops and dumb attorneys in Baltimore City or in Baltimore in that region. the next rape is on me, right? I mean, and that's just, I don't think I could live with that situation. And really what it came down to, not to be all like rape talk here, but what it came down to was there was a moot court, or moot court is where you do like kind of fake court in law school. And people played, you have the different roles. And the girl who was the victim of, it was a rape case. The girl who was the victim forgot her line and forgot if it was a gun or a knife that she was held at. And she screwed it up. And I made her cry in moot court on the witness stand. And that hit me harder. I'm like, oh my God. Like, luckily this wasn't the real world. And that hit me hard, like shockingly hard. And I was like, I can't do this for a living.
Wow. But you didn't flip to the other side to become a prosecutor. I mean, that's very interesting. You just said, forget it.
Yeah, it's stopped being fun. It's not fun when you're like, I made someone cry and this was fake. Like, and that's horrible. And I was like, you know what? I can tell jokes. That was like the other side of it. I like drinking and telling jokes.
That'd be more fun.
Yeah.
Although you still can make people cry if you ply them with enough bourbon and say something really mean.
Oh, you don't need the bourbon. I can get people to cry.
You can do it without the bourbon.
Yeah.
So you are talented. All right. I've got your Twitter feed in front of me because I just find it entertaining. So Meghan McCain, after the primaries in Arizona, complained that the ultra MAGA conspiracy theorists got elected, and she was very disappointed about this. And you responded, was I supposed to laugh at this? Because I did. Was that do I have that right, first of all?
Yeah, she was so upset. I don't understand. By the way, I'm never getting hired by the Federalist, so I can knock them too, because her husband was an editor there. Those two, her and her
Meghan
husband,
McCain's husband is Ben Domenech. Go ahead.
Yeah. If you told me that they just sat in bathtubs full of red wine and drank them with straws all night long, I'd believe it. I don't understand. Like, they just seem like people who like live the most, like my face deflated once I stopped drinking. There's no. But you know what I'm talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Michele, like you may not admit it, but you know people like that. You've met executives, TV executives like that. You're like, okay, yeah, you drink constantly.
Well, we all know people like that. But is she wrong?
I don't know about the conspiracy stuff. I think she's just flailing and wailing. And, at this point, I won't rule out that the 2020 election was stolen. Oh, gasp. Because there's enough video out there of like dirty stuff happening and screaming that that's a conspiracy theory, that nothing happened. That something happened is mind blowing to me, because obviously something did. People have been put in jail here in Texas alone. There was somebody who I think she was convicted of 28 counts of election fraud. So, okay, right. So there's one right there. Like, you can't say that it was the cleanest election ever. And remember, going up to the 2020 election, and that's what's crazy about all these people. They flip on a dime and they get away with it. So going up to the 2020 election, we were told Donald Trump was going to cheat every day. And that was going to be the worst, most unfair election ever, and foreign interference and blah, 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 blah. And as soon as Biden got the W, they were like, that was the cleanest election we've ever seen.
Yeah.
and it's like, how, like, where were you? We literally for like 6 months heard this stuff. Yeah. And suddenly they're like, oh, and then anybody who says that it wasn't clean is a conspiracy theorist. It's like, shut up. I mean,
yeah. So basically in 2020 or 2016, you guys were the conspiracy theorists then, because you said it was stolen.
Russia.
It's getting to be a clown act. And, I'm a daughter of parents who grew up during the Depression, who really appreciate this country. My dad is a son of immigrants, and so he's no longer with us, but he loved this country and he taught us to love this country. And I was raised to learn history and civics, and I know that there's no other place on the planet quite like this, good, bad, or indifferent, but a lot of good. And I see it turning into a clown show in front of my eyes. And we'll just start with the person who's supposed to be the leader of the free world, and that's Joe Biden. And we haven't seen him in days because I think he's tested COVID positive now 64 times or something. Yeah. How did we get here?
Well, okay, so I think the way to fix it, forget how we got here. I think we got here because
Okay. Be better yet. Let's fix it. Go ahead, Tim. I'm
the,
all
the
ears.
the internet and TV is the. I mean, that's how we got here. Come on, we're both ultimately you and I are both part of the problem. But it's fine because
Speak for yourself.
we're good people. Yeah. But here's how we fix it. I think we put everybody through the same immigration citizenship test at 35 that every immigrant has to go through, but then add a piece to it. I'm very dead serious about this, and people think I'm kidding all the time, but I'm not. I think you should have a physical test to remain a citizen of America. So you take this test. It's 30. You do the normal like American history test that everybody has to study for and pass. But then the other test is you have to get through the self checkout line in 90 seconds with 5 items. One of them is a banana, and if you don't know the code for banana, whatever. But you have 90 seconds. You have 5. You get like a can of food, milk, bread, one stray banana, and then one other item. And you have 90 seconds. If you don't get through, they haul you out of the country. They throw you somewhere. They can take you to Canada. I don't care where it is. But I think America improves significantly from that point forward because I don't know, you're a little bougier than me. I don't know if you go grocery shopping on your own. You may not.
I do. I'm not bougie.
You've earned the right not to, though. You've been with a lot of people in your life. You're successful. I have to go there. You wait in line at a Walmart behind like 3 people in the self-checkout line, and you're ready to I'm ready to go on a murderous rage. I don't understand how hard it is for people to scan the thing and then put your card in. That really fixes America because it is just such a simple task that no one can do. Now, elderly people are exempt from this, obviously, but young people, this should be a thing right through it.
These are very interesting litmus tests you have. That's fascinating.
That's all I want. I went on I host Sirius XM radio. I did an hour and a half on this the other day, and people were calling in and they were like, "We agree." See, I think
well, look, there are some physical fitness tests that are required in this country. If you want to serve in the armed forces, right? You've got to be physically fit.
It's
What's
easier.
That?
It's easier now. They scaled them back. It's not as hard.
They scaled them back.
Pretty soon, I'll be able to qualify to be in the military.
Well, we might need you at some point, so just keep that in mind. Keep that in your back pocket.
As a woman in order to get in by the time they move me.
Oh my gosh, that's another issue altogether. In fact, we'll talk about that right after this quick break. Excited to talk about Uncle Tom 2. It unveils the Marxist strategy of creating false racial tension between Americans. Its ultimate goals: obtaining power, destroying capitalism, and replacing God with government. Pre-order Uncle Tom 2 today on salemnow.com. Salemnow.com. Go check it out today. So you mentioned you might have to identify as a woman to qualify for the armed services. I remember Hillary Clinton's alleged attack on women, the war on women, right? And she was all about the war on women.
She was the war on women.
I think there is a legitimate war on women right now. I hate that term, but let's be honest. When Lea Thomas can get into the pool with a bunch of women and win NCAA titles, that's just flat out so unfair. And just because she decided a couple years earlier to identify as a woman doesn't mean she belongs in that category of athletes. And yet, if you say that, as I just did, you're called a homophobe, a transphobic person.
Yeah, racist.
This is insanity. What is that? Do you think this is just such a small sliver of the population screaming at us, and the majority of people feel like you and I do?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, the majority, that tiny minority gets their way, right? Because they're on social media and they understand. That's where they've camped out, and Democrats and media people pay attention to them. I mean, look, my career is made because I write things on the toilet and then I get quoted in every major publication known to man, right? And it's crazy to me that happens. But it's lazy journalism has elevated people to new heights that they would have never had in the 80s or 90s, right? So that's where this kind of these thoughts are getting pushed, is that, again, and also it's liberals that are running these publications. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Didn't Lea Thomas, when she used to be a man, was ranked 460th and then went to number 1?
Yeah.
Smart. Smart. Why not? Why wouldn't you take advantage of the
Yeah, well, look, she took
morals?
advantage of the system. The NCAA let these women down in a big, big way. And it's happening in other sports. It's happened in track and field. It's happened in professional cycling.
Brittany
And it's
Griner.
just, it's now,
Have you heard? Have you
Brittany
deeper
Griner.
voice than me? Anyway,
She's, look, I am concerned about Brittany Griner. The day we're recording this podcast, you and I, she is potentially going to find out her sentence in
it's gonna be
Russia.
10 years.
I do.
It's gonna be 10 years.
They're looking for 9.5. I
Yeah.
do believe that somehow we'll get her home, but the trade-off is going to be uncomfortable.
I don't think we're getting her. Listen, if
You don't.
no, why would Russia negotiate with America when we've given $60 billion to an army to try to murder them? Why would they ever negotiate with us?
Well, because we've got some of their folks.
They wanted like we were like, we'll give you the international arms deal. They're like, we want that one and the murderer.
Yeah. I know.
We'll probably just
I
give
know.
it to them. This is ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
I'm genuinely worried about Brittany Griner, though. I mean, I look, whatever. She should have been more careful, but I'm not sure that warrants 10 years in a Russian prison. That's pretty cruel stuff over there. This makes me sad, honestly. And I don't even know her. I don't know her. So anyway, that's another thing. But so you've got also this huge emphasis in school unions, school boards across the country now wanting to implement new language for pronouns and the like.
Yeah.
And we just had Demi Lovato change her mind. She was going as they, them, or their, or they. And now she's back to she, her, she announced. And look, I'm going to give her some grace and say, you changed your mind. That's cool, whatever. But this is where it's getting silly. Like, how are we supposed to keep track of everybody that decides one day they want to be he, his, they, their, her, she, and then a month later they come back to school and they've changed again, and now the teacher's going to get in trouble because they use the wrong pronouns. This to me is insane, and it makes us look ridiculous.
Yeah, how you get around it is you ignore it all. How about that? Like, that's where we all need to be, is like, yeah, shut up. How about that? Like, I don't care what your pronouns are. I'm going to be respectful of everyone just in general because I don't know people, like whatever.
Yeah.
But the moment the line is crossed is when people point at me and they're like, you have to say this to me. And I'm like, no, I don't. No.
Yeah,
And that's
I
what
don't have to
everybody
say
needs
anything
do.
to anyone. That's where, when you start forcing people to say things, aren't we becoming authoritarianism here?
Yeah. And poor Demi Lovato, man. You know what? The thing about her that gets me is that she's one of those child stars. And I think like everyone in that industry that came up like in her generation was screwed up for some reason or another, or like molested or something. There was that creepy guy at Nickelodeon. Remember that story a couple of years ago? That creepy guy at Nickelodeon was like into like kids' feet and stuff. And if you actually watch the videos and the breakdown of it, he was like the guy who discovered like Ariana Grande and I think Lovato and a few other people. And like, there's all these scenes where kids are doing weird stuff with their feet in the shows. Like the guy was a weirdo that like, they kind of,
there are a lot of weirdos in Hollywood. Don't you think? I mean, some of this, you look back now, let's take a guy like Kevin Spacey and you look at some of the films that he made, or you look at House of Cards and some of the scenes in House of Cards. I don't know. I was a fan in the beginning and you think, I'm starting to think Kevin came up with that scenario there, that weird sex scene and involving 16 people,
I mean, like, so for me, and the reason that Lovato hits me a different way is like, my default is I want to make fun of it. Right. But I don't, because I realize that there's something much deeper with her. And I really think that it's and not like, again, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you would have told me that I would be having a conversation with you about, like pedophiles or whatever in Hollywood and all that, I'd be like, you're crazy. That's conspiracy theory stuff. Now that like Jeffrey Epstein happened and all these other things have come to light, I'm like, oh my God, like this is happening. And these kids in this industry, I feel horrible for these kids in this industry. And I can only imagine what it was like in the 80s and 90s coming up, while parents are forcing their kids to try to be famous. And then you have all these kind of weirdos and freaks in the production industry.
Britney Spears is another great example. But if you think about, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, I think because I covered the NFL for so long that I remember when I was in awe of a certain player, or a player hit his peak and he was just mobbed by the public and adored and asked for in every post-game interview and all the rest, whatever. Peak, just the peak of his craft. And then he retires and he's 33 years old. I'm not talking about anyone specific here. And it all goes quiet. What do you think happens to that person? I mean, if you come from a really strong, stable background and you've got good people around you, you learn to handle it. But if you don't, and your whole identity has been built around this, you're a football player, you're an NFL star, and then it's over, that's got to screw with you, don't you think?
Oh yeah, not only that too, they're out of money, right? So like I
Uh,
know one of the things that sports agents, the game that agents play now are like payday loans for these guys. So there are a couple of agents that have made so much money that they give all they're like, hey, we'll give you your money up front if you want. We can give you like a good chunk of it, and then the agent then takes even more money on the back end.
Yeah.
And so you get these kids who are like 18, 19, they come in, they're super popular, like you said. They make all their money, they blow all their money because they're living a lavish life at the same time, and they get spit out at the back end of their career. They're at like 30. It's
Yeah.
wild to watch, and it's a lot of mismanagement. Again, it's the entertainment industry just eats people up and spits them out, and they suck in kids when they can, especially with athletes, and athletes aren't the brightest and best. They're just good at carrying footballs and throwing things, or dunking.
Yeah.
So if they don't have a good team around them, they're screwed ultimately. It's such a weird, it's kind of dark. It's weird, right? Because everybody wants to grow up and be a rich, famous athlete or something, or rich, famous, whatever, entertainer. You realize how like dark and awful people can end up.
It can, and in the vast majority of cases. I mean, you start with just the college athletes who have been, I was going to say groomed. Am I allowed to use that word anymore?
I
Groomed?
think so for this. Yeah.
Okay. So you're groomed to be a star wide receiver or a quarterback or running back or whatever it is. And that's your whole identity. You skate through college because of it. You get drafted in the first round or the sixth round, and only a little percentage of those guys who were playing in college at their highest levels get to the NFL. And then those guys, you've got one Tom Brady, you've got one Peyton Manning. There are so few that end up being these generational stars, right? That even when Tom Brady's done playing, he's going to remain okay. Peyton Manning is done just fine. Drew Brees is going to be okay, and Aaron Rodgers is going to be all right. Russell Wilson and he married Ciara, so they're going to be just fine. It's like Patrick Mahomes. He's a really smart kid. He learned through his dad and what pro athletics was like. He's going to be fine. I think I've just listed off maybe 8 guys
Yeah.
out of the entire NFL population who are going to remain, I guess the word is relevant. But there are plenty of guys who were superstars that I've known very well throughout the years that I've covered this, who I hope they're having happy, productive lives, but they don't remain at the Tom Brady level, right? It's like you said, it's kind of, you get spit out the other end and forgotten.
Well, I was just thinking, I spent my years in Baltimore. I can't remember the name of the guy who was in The Blind Side. What was that?
Michael Orr.
There you go. Great movie. Can't remember his name now. And if I can't, most people can't.
Right. I can only because, that's my job. But
Yeah.
even still, I saw a picture of Joe Burrow the other day and I didn't remember it was Joe Burrow. So, but he's so young and fresh that I haven't covered him enough. But yes, I know The Blind Side, great movie. Michael Orr, big star. I remember meeting him for the first time and it was like, this is so interesting meeting this guy that we saw. And you're right. I'm not even, I'd have to look up right now because I'm no longer covering the NFL. I'd have to look up to see if he's still on a team. I don't know, but you're right. It goes from a peak to poof, and it's just really got to mess with people. So how are you going to remain relevant, Tim?
Oh, I'm going to work and I'm going to die on stage somewhere. I'm like, I just look, words, being a mouthy person, I shouldn't be where I am now, but things continue to grow and they're growing at a much more rapid pace for me. I don't think this goes away, but if it does, I'd be totally happy with that.
You would? You just sit with your bourbon?
Yeah, so I do a bourbon podcast too, and I'm pretty respected in the industry with that now, and it's crazy. Like I have expanded, and I continue to throw darts all over the place and expand my business and do other things. constantly. There's not just one thing. So, I grew up super poor in Southwest Baltimore, and learned not to take for granted what little you get. And so,
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that. It's very, very cool. Before I let you go, then give me Bourbon 101, because I don't drink bourbon. Tell me why I should try it.
if you don't, then don't. What's your drink right now? Like what's your default
I,
drink? Some girly thing, vodka
I'm
soda?
just a wine drinker. I like
Nah,
Pinot
see,
Noir and
it,
Cabernet.
it's really hard to get women over to not to be. It's hard to get women over
It's
to.
okay. I'm not offended.
But if you do it though, this is my favorite starter. It's Angel's Envy Rye, and it's very, very sweet, aged in Caribbean casks, and it tastes like dessert. It's kind of very, very caramelly, and it's
Ooh.
about $89 a bottle. This would be the starter that I'd give you, and you'd probably be like, "Oh, that's different." And that's usually how I
Okay.
get people in. And actually, so not only did I say that I've done this, so every person we've talked to, so on my podcast, Let's Drink Bourbon, which I host with my co-host is Wesley Henderson, who helped found this. Was the founder of it. Brad Paisley agreed with me. He was our first guest. We had Brad Paisley on, and all of the other
Nice. Nice name dropping there. That's good.
yeah, all the other founders and country music stars that we've had on, they agree that Angel's Envy Rye is the way to go. By the way, right next to that, 2 bottles over, is Peyton Manning's Sweetens Cove weeded whiskey.
I'm looking at the alignment of the label and trying to figure out if there's some sort of cryptic, NFL passing play involved there.
Probably, and then you got the colors there, right? You got your blue and white. So
There you go. The Colts colors. You know who you should have on your bourbon podcast? Have you asked Chris Collinsworth?
No.
You might want to extend an invitation. He's a big bourbon drinker.
I wanted to get away from politics. That was the whole point of that, and I'm very happy to continue to be away from politics with that. What's amazing is that for me, being as political as I am, and my entire career being based on it, I hate it. You love the NFL, you cover the NFL. I hate politics. The more you get involved, the dumber you realize people are. Like, especially
that is the truth. That is the truth. I hate to say that, but that's what scares me about the more that I get in and what I see in these people who are running things.
Yeah.
And it's that I'm fearful of that.
Tell me
we're not going to lose our great republic.
Well, idiocracy.
You're not telling me.
Idiocracy is pretty accurate. I'll be very honest with you. And when you realize that, like, when you go into Congress, right? So there's a couple of really good people and there's a couple of very altruistic people up there. But when you realize most of these people are banging reporters and banging each other and like cheating on everybody and like just are drunks or whatever, and you're like, oh my, like, it really, the ivory tower crumbles real quick. You've got this very high sense of morals and values with your elected officials, and you shouldn't, because they're no better than, actually a lot of them are way worse than most normal people.
No question. And on that happy note, I expected for Tim to cheer me up, and now I'm depressed again. But it does make some good people want to run for office because they want to get in and help clean things up. But it's so frustrating to know whom you're going to have to deal with and how you're going to be able to do that. But I'll just keep hoping and praying, and I guess trying bourbon.
Yeah, and don't watch the news once in a while too. Just turn it off. It really makes me happy to not watch the news.
It's a good way to be. Ignorance is bliss. They've said that, and it's proven out. So you can check out Tim Young again. He's on Twitter at Tim Runs His Mouth, and he does, and it's fun. And then the other, so plug your 2 podcasts here. What's the bourbon one?
So I'm going to be doing another one coming up here pretty soon. So I never do the one, but I do the bourbon one all the time now. I do Let's Drink Bourbon. It's fantastic. You can hear me on SiriusXM like all the time. I'm the top fill-in for SiriusXM Patriots. So like I basically am all over that network all the time. And I had a political one for a while, but I was like, man, I hate this. So I stopped doing it, and I get yelled at. So like I have all these like professionals that are like, do you know how much money you could be making if you were doing a podcast right now? I'm like, yeah, I hate it though. So that's fine. I'm good.
Hey, money isn't everything.
I mean,
it's not everything. Happiness is that trumps it every time. Tim, I hope we can do this again. This was a lot of fun. All the best to you. Good luck. Let's drink bourbon, folks. Yeah. Appreciate you, Tim.
Thanks for having me.
This has been Sideline Sanity. I'm Michele Tafoya. Tim runs his mouth on Twitter. Hey, be brave, do good, and try some bourbon. Well, we always appreciate it when Charles Thorngren can join the podcast and talk a little money and gold in particular with us. Gold and silver. And Charles, these are mad times. I mean, it's just really wacky. And anyone who's watching the stock market is probably asking themselves, what do I do? I don't know, I don't know how to ride this roller coaster with everyone. And so obviously you recommend investing in precious metals. What's the first step that someone should take in learning about what precious metals can do for them?
The first step, give us a call, right? We're going to show you what options there are available. That's what Legacy is about, is showing you options and educating everyone. The important thing to know is that we don't invest in gold and silver because it's pretty or because it's unique. Those things are true, but we do it because it has the history of being the true diversity for someone's portfolio. It's the insurance policy against everyone's retirement and their savings. So this is why we look at gold and silver specifically. It's the currency that was always meant to be, right? It is not a fiat currency. There's no inflationary effect on it. Gold and silver are going to be worth what they're worth. The thing that changes with everything is the amount of dollars it takes to buy that gold and silver and the amount of dollars you get for owning that gold and silver. That's the big key. And this is what people don't understand about it typically, is that it is not the stock market and it is not the dollar. It's an investment that is counter to both of those. So it gives you true diversity and balance, is what everyone's looking for right now. They just don't know it. As inflation gets higher, this is where gold and silver come in.
Someone is saying, okay, I want to do this, but I want to choose one or the other. When they call you and ask you these questions, when would you recommend gold and when would you recommend silver?
That's a great question. And what a lot of people wind up doing is actually doing a little of both, because that's possible, right? But it's going to depend on your specific investment parameters. And that's one of the things we're going to do, that we're different from your typical stockbroker, because we're not going to say, this is what all my customers are doing, because that's not what's important. What's important is what matters to you and your portfolio. When is your retirement coming up? What are you looking to accomplish, right? What are your risks? What are your safety features that you need? So there's a lot that goes into it. And what we do here is talk with you, right? Our big thing is to educate you so that you understand why you're doing it, as well as in what form and fashion, because that's important.
It is important. And I think too that people probably think, I'm a small investor. This is not for me. I can't afford to do this. I can't afford to do this at a level that will benefit me. To them, you would say what?
I don't think you can afford not to. If you have money saved and you're not flush with cash, it's more important than ever for you to make sure that you put yourself in a protective situation, right? You have less to lose, so you should not lose it. It's really, it's not about how much money you have or don't have. It's about how much protection you need. And if you don't have a very large portfolio, then you probably need it more than the guy who does, because you can't afford that loss. And look at what the market's done over the course of the year. We are talking about a situation where the loss is extravagant and it's not done yet. This is why we look at precious metals to counter that.
And lastly, Charles, for those who fear that a recession may already be here or is coming, what do you tell them about how in a recession this investment helps out?
Great question. Couple answers there. We are in a recession, but the reality is it's not going to get bad for a few more months. Then it's really going to be bad. What we see happen next year is going to be devastating. Just think 2007, 2008, right? The troubles with 2008 happened in 2007. It just took time for it to hit the market in a real sense. And this is what we see. We have inflationary numbers that rival the 80s. Um, that's something that's going to be dramatic. So when we look at this, we say, why do we want to do it? And that's exactly why. It helps because it's not the dollar and it's not the stock market, right? This is the safe haven investment. And if you look at long-term wisdom, that's what metals do. They give you a place to store your wealth without the effects of inflation, right? Inflation is good for your metals. The stock market correcting is good for your metals. A weak economy is better for your metals. So that's what it's meant to do. And that's why it has its place in the economy. We're talking about a worst case scenario right now, but even under the best of terms, the government tells you 2 to 3% inflation is a good thing. And at 2 or 3%, it doesn't sound bad, right? But over the course of your retirement and your lifetime investing, if you go 40 years, you've lost over 120% of value of your dollar by not having metals. So even in the best of times, there should be some in your portfolio. And during the worst, you really want to make sure you get a hold of somebody who can explain why and show you what options you have.
Yeah, that's why we love to recommend Legacy Precious Metals on our show, Sideline Sanity. So the website is legacypminvestments.com, legacypminvestments.com. You can also go to the website and find the phone number to call, learn a whole lot more. It's just worth asking some questions, right? A quick phone call and getting more information about everyone's specific situation.
Absolutely. We're a no pressure organization. Everyone who contacts us, they reach out to us. We share information. If it's right for you, great. If it's not, that's great too. Learning something never hurt anybody.
No, that is true. And we're glad we had you on to learn something from you today, Charles Thorngren. Again, it's legacypminvestments.com. Please go check them out. Just ask some questions, learn a little something. Thank you so much, Charles.
My pleasure. Thank you.